All right, welcome back, guys. It's time for lesson 4. We're finally getting into part 3 of the IELTS speaking exam. Let's get into a little bit of review of part 2. Remember, we studied 2 strategies. The 4 corner strategy and, oh, I don't know why we have that there twice. Anyway, 2 strategies. Strategy A was called 4 corners. And in that strategy, we looked at the 4 pieces of the prompt in the topic card. All right, and we planned those in 4 different sections of our notes. Okay, this is a way of organizing your ideas based on what they give you on the card. Okay, not a bad strategy. Some people prefer this strategy. Keeps it a little bit more simple. Add your details for each of these. Okay? If you really struggle with fluency, I think this is a good strategy to stick with. The strategy B is the 5 points strategy. So we are ignoring these 4 points, and we're using these 5 points instead. Okay? And there's no punishment for that, as long as you stay with the topic. Okay, you don't have to use the bullet points. They're just there as kind of guidance that you can use or ignore. So, in this case, we are ignoring them and using our 5 points. Introduction, experience, detail, opinion, and hope. Okay? So, writing down keywords for each area. Okay, this was about a sporting event. Okay, keywords for each one. And then using specific skills, highlighting specific skills for each point. The introduction, there's not really any specific skills. Experience, we're highlighting our use of past tense, simple past, past perfect, and past continuous. With the detail point, we're emphasizing adjective use. Expansive, massive, booming. Our opinion point, we are highlighting opinion expressions as well as comparative adjectives. As far as I'm concerned, more enjoyable, more popular. The way I see it, more dramatic, fewer, more electric. All right. And the final point, hope, we are using future tenses. Future simple. Future continuous. And future perfect. Now, if you don't know how to use these grammar structures, don't try to force yourself into them, okay? But if you go back to lesson 3, you may be able to pick up some tips on how to set up your answers so that these past perfect or future perfect or past continuous or future continuous, those will come a little more naturally. Go back and look at lesson 3 for more advice on that. And remember that there are several advantages to the 5-point strategy. For me, the first one and the last one are most important. Okay? You focus on vocabulary and grammar rather than fluency. And also, it's much more consistent practice. You're using the same 5 points for every topic. Okay? Rather than being stuck with the points in the original topic card. Now, let's get on to part 3. Okay, now in part 3, this first lesson, I'm going to give you some tips for a higher score. And then in the second lesson, we'll cover 7 different question types. All right, but for now, we're really just looking at how to expand your answers and get a higher score. So the basics. Here's how part 3 works. The topic for part 3 follows from part 2. So if you remember in our last lesson, The final example we did was about borrowing something from a friend. Okay? So part 3 would then continue with that idea of borrowing things. Okay? Borrowing things, lending things, maybe borrowing money, giving things to your friends, gift giving maybe. All right? All of those ideas would come from your topic in part 2. So the advantage for part 3 is that the questions should be somewhat predictable. You at least will know what the topic of the questions is. Part 3 goes for 4 to 5 minutes. Okay, and just like with part 1, the answers you give might be interrupted if you're speaking for too long, because they want to get through at least a good majority of the questions that they have. Okay, you're not going to be able to speak on just one topic for 5 minutes. The examiner will cut you off. Okay, that happens sometimes. As an examiner, I always feel a little bit bad when I have to do that, but I'm not, you don't lose any points for that. Okay, so don't be shocked or don't feel bad if you are interrupted. It's probably a good thing. Now the examiner, when we give the exam, we have in front of us a piece of paper with 6 questions on it for part 3, and that's in 2 to 3 sections. Okay? So there might be like 2, 2, and 2, or it might be 3 and 3. You see what I mean? Okay, so 2 sections or 3 sections containing those 6 questions in it. The ideal answer is 4 to 5 sentences long. Okay? You can speak more than that if you want, but you might be cut off. All right? Shorter than that, and you're not gonna get to 4 minutes. Okay? And then the examiner is gonna have to say something like, "Could you tell me a little more about that?" That is a bad sign. Okay? If the examiner is having to tell you to talk more, your fluency score is going down, guaranteed. Okay? It's also really awkward. As an examiner, I hate when students don't speak enough, because I have to help them, or I have to push them along the whole time I'm marking down their score. But anyway, try to speak at least 4 sentences. If you need time to think, you can use some expressions. Okay? The examiner, we're not expecting you to answer immediately. Okay? You're only human, right? You need some time to consider your thoughts, right? But silence is uncomfortable. Okay? So there are expressions you can use to hesitate for longer. All right? So expressions like this. That's an interesting question. Let me think. Or, I've never thought about that. 1 second. Or, let me see. Or, well, it's hard to say off the top of my head. Okay, off the top of my head means spontaneously. Do not use these with every answer. Okay? I get this a lot, honestly. A lot of students pick one of these, like this first one is the most common. That's an interesting question. And after every question I ask them, they answer, that's an interesting question. Like, really? Every question I asked is interesting? So try not to do that, okay? Don't use them every time. Maybe the let me see, you can use a little bit more, but the rest of these, don't use it more than once in the test, because it sounds too planned. It sounds really unnatural, okay? Use them a little bit, though. It's okay. Now, here are some basic ways to extend your answer. Remember, you need 4 or 5 sentences, so you're going to need to expand your ideas a little bit. The first way is called why. All right? So, let's take a sentence. I drink coffee every day. As you say that, be asking yourself why. Why do you drink coffee every day? I love the taste, and it gives me a caffeine boost. Why? Why do you love the taste? In general, I like foods that taste bitter or unique, like whiskey or mustard. Why? Why do you like those flavors, right? Why? To me, the taste of these foods is complex, and I enjoy the process of learning to discern the subtlety of the flavors. Oh, I spelled subtlety wrong, but anyway, you get the idea. Notice, by the way, that each of these pieces gets longer and longer, and each time we add more and more complex words. Bitter, unique, complex, discern, subtlety. All right? So the more you ask why, the more abstract and interesting your ideas are becoming. Okay? So keep asking yourself why. Develop your ideas. Another way to extend your answer is to use examples. Okay? It seems really obvious, but a lot of students that I have seen do not use examples, and they run out of things to say. They are not able to speak for long enough. So an example is a good way to extend things. Let's look at this. I love to travel. Okay, we want to give an example for this. For instance, just last year, I took 3 different trips. One to Japan, another to Egypt, and another to Spain. And you could develop this thought as well. Ask yourself why. Why did you go to Japan? Right? Why did you choose Spain rather than another European country? Okay. Why did you go to Egypt? What did you want to see there? Okay. So use the example and then keep building from there. Paraphrasing the question. All right, this is an interesting one. All right, but a good one though, and it shows off a little bit of skill as well. We do this with our writing a lot, right? We paraphrase the writing prompt. So here's the question from the examiner. What is the biggest environmental problem your country faces? You mean, what environmental issue needs to be dealt with the most urgently? Okay, so it shows some good flexibility in terms of your grammar. Okay, it also uses up a little bit of time. There's 1 sentence, done. You only need 3 more, and you have a long enough answer. Okay? Here's another way, is to use what would be called a concession. Okay, but you can start them all the same way. Some people would say blah, blah, blah. Okay? So, same question from the examiner, right? What is the biggest environmental problem your country faces? Some people say that clean water and air is the biggest issue we need to deal with. I can understand how or why they feel this way. However, I think, okay, notice we have 2 sentences there before we even get to our own opinion, right? Great way to extend your answer before you even begin answering. So these are your four methods for extending your answer. Why? Examples, paraphrase the question, and some people would say. All right, so let's look at an example here of a full answer using these strategies. Okay. How does advertising affect people's choices? All right, let's see. Let me see. There's our hesitation, right? You mean, how are people's shopping decisions influenced by advertising? Sorry, that should say people's. Well, some people would say that the average consumer is becoming a lot more savvy than they used to be. So advertising is having a lesser effect than it did in the past. However, I think advertising allows companies to create an image for their company or brand. For example, countries that sponsored the Olympic coverage on TV recently were able to convey an image of being patriotic and wholesome. All right, so notice, this is my answer. I think advertising allows companies to create an image for their company or brand. All the rest is my extension. Okay? We had rephrasing the question. We used a some people would say, and then we gave an example. Okay, let's look at another example. Some people say that online education will be more common in the future. Do you agree? That's an interesting question. You mean that in the future, more and more people will take online courses as opposed to traditional classroom courses? In my opinion, we are reaching a tipping point at which people are starting to realize the value of face-to-face educational experiences. For example, my friend recently completed his master's degree online, and he said that he really wished he had more opportunities to meet with his classmates and talk to his professors. So again, right in the middle here, this is our answer. The rest is extension. Rephrasing the question, example. Let's take a look at some sample answers next. Okay, you guys, so here are the 6 questions that you just experienced in our simulation exam. So let's take a look at them one by one. So to start with, what can people learn from traveling? All right, what can people learn from traveling? Let's see. I want to start by rephrasing the question. So how would I rephrase this? You mean, how can traveling, how about what kind of lessons can traveling teach us? That's an interesting question. All right, we used it once. We're not going to use it again. That's an interesting question. All right, now let's see here. What is my opinion, really? What can people learn from traveling? Well, they learn about other cultures, right? So let's stick with that. Now, how to extend this? Let's not use the some people would say. Let's just say, I think the most valuable lesson people can learn is that other cultures are not so different from our own. Okay? Now I want to ask why. Okay? I want to ask myself, why can people learn that? When we travel to other countries, or even other regions of our own country, we meet people who are different from ourselves. But as we get to know them and look beyond the surface, look beneath the surface, we can see that they share similar hopes and dreams and struggles as we do. Okay, so there's my why. I do a pretty long why. It's very idealistic, isn't it? And then if we wanted to, we can give an example, okay? So, for example, when I traveled to Brazil, I made a few good Brazilian friends there, and I realized that they have fun and enjoy themselves in the same ways that I do. Okay, maybe not the most idealistic example compared to my idealistic thought, but overall, good. A nice, long, extended answer. I had plenty of chances to use some interesting vocabulary, some good grammar as well. All right, let's move to the next one. Do you think international tourism is a good thing? Let's see. Do you mean... Oh, why does that look... There we go. Do you mean whether international tourism has a positive effect on a country? Okay, so we're rephrasing the prompt, okay? And let's not use a hesitation device here, okay? Let's just jump right into it. Whether international tourism has a positive effect on a country, let's say positive and negative, okay? Are both and negative, okay? In a positive way, international tourism can boost the economy. Let's use an example. For example, a city like Las Vegas has been able to perform very well economically due to foreign guests at their casinos and hotels. On the other hand, what would be the negative part of international tourism? International tourism can have cultural effects that are not so positive. In Chinatown is an interesting example, but I don't want to use it here. I think it's too complex. A place that, or why can it have a negative cultural effect? Well, yes, people can water down their own culture to sell it to tourists. You can see this effect in some places in Thailand. And I'm just going to leave it there. I think describing all of that would probably make my answer too long. Okay? Yeah, but what I was thinking of actually was this tribe in northwestern Thailand that they put rings on their neck. You know what I'm talking about? They wear these rings and they extend the length of their neck. And what I've heard is that they only still do this because they can make money from it, from tourists. Okay? So they're kind of like, they're only presenting one part of their culture to tourists and not really showing their whole lifestyle. So anyway, that was my point. But I will keep it simple in the answer there. Now, let's move on here. What are the most popular tourist destinations among people in your country? Okay, let's hesitate for a minute here. Let's see. And let's not rephrase the question on this one because we did it twice in a row there. But instead, let's use we haven't done a concession yet. So let's say some people would say that, let's see, I'm American, so the Statue of Liberty is the most popular destination for tourists to America, tourists visiting America. And let's add one more sentence. And it's true that many tourists do visit there. However, this landmark. However, I don't think the Statue of Liberty is particularly interesting. It is actually a good deal shorter than it appears in pictures. Okay? So it is not that impressive. For me, a better tourist destination in New York would be Central Park. Most foreigners that I have met say that Central Park was very impressive and interesting to them. Okay, so notice what I did there. I started with the some people, okay, and then I shifted to, some people think Statue of Liberty is great. However, I think it's not very good, and I think this place is better. Okay, so using the concession in this part, I was able to extend my answer. My answer really is simple, Central Park. Okay, but I was able to extend it using the concession. All right, bear with me here. Let's move to the next one. How should tourists behave when they come to your country? Okay. Let's rephrase it here. You mean, how should they act in order to be polite and not offend people? It's a pretty good rephrasing, I think. And let's see. Let's use, definitely can use some examples here. I don't think we want to use a concession on this one. So let's say, I think most behavior would be acceptable in America, but there are a few things to avoid. Okay, or a few, let's say, behaviors. Spell check. First of all, it is important not to take pictures in museums. I have noticed many foreign tourists and domestic tourists as well breaking the museum rules by taking pictures, and it is very disrespectful. Also, we should think of one more. Also, America has become quite sensitive when it comes to smoking. So tourists should be very careful not to smoke in public if there are people nearby. Yeah, it's pretty good. So those are my two examples, right? A few behaviors to avoid, and I gave one example, okay, and I gave two examples. Okay, what is the best way for a tourist to learn about your country while traveling? Let me think about that for a moment. Okay. There are, let's kind of rephrase it by saying there are many ways Why are they? Oh, many. There are many ways for tourists to learn while traveling. Let's use a concession here. Some people would recommend, let's see, to learn about my country while traveling. Some people would recommend buying a guidebook and following the suggestions that the guidebook offers. However, I think guidebooks typically suggest places that are easily accessible, and sometimes they even make financial agreements with the restaurants and locations they recommend. Personally, I think it is better to spend some time wandering around. It is not the most efficient way to approach your trip, but it is the best way to accidentally discover interesting people and places, places, and foods. It's a more authentic, let's say, it gives a more authentic image of a country. Okay. Yep. So by using this concession, right, some people would say, or some people would recommend, okay, and then I say why I don't think that's a good idea, and then I say what I think is a good idea. So this has allowed me to take my one idea, which is wander around, and make it into a nice full 4 or 5 sentences. Whew, okay, we're on to our last question. Bear with me here. What are the advantages and disadvantages of traveling by train? Okay, so let's start with the advantages. And I love traveling by train, and I look for every opportunity to do it. Okay, why? Why do you like traveling by train? Well, the best thing is the slow pace when compared with air travel. Okay, why do I like the slow pace? Okay. When I travel at a slow pace, I end up meeting new people and learning a lot more about the place I am traveling in. Okay, why do we end up meeting new people? Many people find train travel boring, and maybe that is why people tend to talk to each other more on a train than in other types of transportation. Okay, so that's pretty good. So I look for the opportunity to do it. Why do I like it? Why do I like a slow pace? Why do people meet each other on a train? Okay, so just following the why idea, I extended that. But we need to say the disadvantages as well. The biggest disadvantage is that it takes longer to get where you are going. For example, let's use an example. When I traveled from, let's say, China to Russia, it took 5 days to get there. When traveling by plane would have taken just 12 hours. By the way, I have no idea how long it takes to get from China to Russia. The IELTS examiner doesn't care if you are accurate, okay? This is totally made up, not really true, but totally fine to use. Okay? So you can see I used the why here, and then I used the example extender here. Sample answers for this practice B. Okay, and for this one, instead of typing them all out with you, we're just going to read my sample answers, and you can see how I use the strategies, the different extending ways to get each one. Okay, so read with me the first one. What are the most common items purchased by visitors to your country? Well, let's see. You mean, what are the most popular souvenirs from the United States? Well, some people would say that t-shirts are the most popular souvenir, especially the I Love New York t-shirts that have become so popular. Personally, though, I think food-based souvenirs are becoming more popular. For example, I was recently back in the US on holiday, and I noticed a lot of tourists at the airport were buying foods that were famous in the city I was visiting. Okay, I used an example, and I also used the some people would say, and I even used the rephrasing the question. All right, check out the next one. What are some things young people in your country like to buy? Young people have various interests, so it is difficult to answer in a general way. I will say, though, that young people are more interested in pop culture, perhaps, than other age groups. So they may be more likely to buy things like CDs and posters of their favorite pop artists. I would imagine, I should say imagine, that if you walked into a music store in my country, you would find mostly young people in there. Okay, cool. Yeah, this one I used kind of a different style of hesitation, explaining why it's difficult to answer. I found this question to be probably the most difficult one, just because it is so general. What are some things young people like to buy? Ugh, I don't know. Young people don't have any money. I don't know what they like to buy. So I struggled a little with this one. You can see it's a bit shorter than my other answers. Now, is it important to save money? You mean, is it necessary for people to put money into savings? Well, some people would argue that putting money in the bank is a waste. They would say that we should invest our money, otherwise it is not really doing anything for us. Personally, I think having at least some money in the bank gives me some peace of mind, so that if there is some kind of accident or emergency, I won't be left high and dry. Okay, so you can see what I did there, right? I did some people would. I also did a rephrasing the question, right? And this sentence, instead of disagreeing, I elaborated on why some people think this way. Okay, so that's another way to continue the concession. Say what other people think and explain why they think that, and then disagree. Okay. Do you think that people with a lot of money are happier than others? Oh, happiness is a hard thing to measure, actually, so it's a difficult question. Some people certainly seem to live their lives as if they think money will give them happiness. However, I think we all come to realize at some point that this is not true. For example, research has revealed that some of the happiest nations in the world are among the poorest as well. All right, so use an example, okay? Just like with this question here, right, where I gave kind of reason why it's difficult, I did the same thing here. Questions about happiness are always pretty difficult to answer. All right, and I used, yes, a kind of concession here as well. I didn't say some people say, but some people seem to live this way. Now, how can shops make shopping more pleasant for their customers? That is an interesting question. Let me think for a moment. You mean, what can shop owners do to improve the shopping experience? I think they can start by treating each customer like an individual. Some shops have general policies about customer interactions, and they are not flexible enough to treat each customer well. For example, I don't like when salespeople follow me around the store, but I know that is the general policy of some stores. The salespeople see that I don't like it, but they don't have a choice. All right, so I used a hesitation device. Okay, I rephrased the question, and then I gave my answer. I said why, and then I gave an example. Okay, do you guys know what I mean here? Drives me crazy when I get followed around the store. And finally, in the future, will people do all of their shopping online? Let me see. You mean, will traditional offline stores totally disappear? I could see how some people might predict this as internet access spreads around the globe and more shopping is done online. However, I think shopping gives people a reason to go out and be with people, even if they are strangers. The social aspect of shopping will stop the internet from completely dominating the shopping market. Okay, so you can see the rephrased question. Okay, a kind of concession. Some people would say that. However, this, okay, and why. All right, so those are our strategies put into use in this practice exam. You can see I managed to make it not too formulaic, right? By kind of switching it up every so often. I don't rephrase the question every single time, just because it sounds a little bit rehearsed. But overall, those 4 ways of extending will do a good job with pretty much any question that you have. And that concludes our lesson for today. All right. Now in the next lesson, we'll go into some more detail and talk about how to highlight your skills, each of the kind of grammar and vocabulary skills that you have. But I think using these 4 strategies to extend your answer, this is the quickest and best way to improve your band score in a very efficient way. All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in, and I hope to see you in the next lesson. Goodbye.